Hi, welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Doc Talk. This is episode 169A.
I'm Cam and this is Julie. I almost did that wrong. This week's Torah portion, we are on 37 all the way to the end of 40, which is 40 verse 23. This is our fourth year doing it. Yep. So we have 3 from previous years. They are right here. Feel free to look them up. Listen to them. They've got some great stuff. Again, we're going to try to not repeat. Next year, we'll probably start bringing in and mixing it all. But yeah, right now, we still got a few things to discuss. And I wanted to jump into chapter 39. And I wanted to read 39:3 says, and his master, this is talking about Joseph, and it's talking about Potiphar, his master. And his master saw that Yoveh was with him as Joseph, and that Yoveh made all he did to prosper in his hand. You know, this really is in itself quite a testimony. To me, reading it, it makes me realize, wow, Joseph really is walking in the ways of his forefathers. Mm-hmm. If we think about Abraham, we have Abraham who's told by Amalek that Amalek recognizes that everything he does, that the Lord is with him. Right. We have Jacob, who is, Isaac, who is also told this by Amalek, that the Lord is with him, therefore he would like to be in covenant with him. Right. We have, also Laban does this with Jacob. So now we have Joseph following in the patriarchs' footsteps, yes. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking, what a testimony to the characteristic or the character of Joseph, because how many people do we know today are mistreated by other Christians or other believers, and then they just completely reject God because those people mistreated me, so I'm just going to reject the God that mistreated, that they stand for. And hello, Israel. I mean,
what a fantastic point. I hadn't thought of that. Right. So you literally have, and we have a little bit further down in verse 9 where he says, when he's talking about the woman hitting on him, and he makes the comment, he says, Potiphar's wife, he says, no one is greater in this house than I, and he being Potiphar, has not withheld whatever from me but you, because you are his wife. And how should I do such a great evil and sin against Elohim, not against Potiphar, but against Elohim, whom he recognizes, put him in the position to prosper. So I love how you said that he's not angry at them. Because, if you go back and you look at chapter 37, where you have the dealings with his brothers, they start off basically when he's 17, and who knows if not before that, being embittered towards him. And then the more that the Lord blesses him and gives him this knowledge and this understanding, they become more and more envious. They are absolutely jealous, and that jealousy drives them to let's just get rid of him. Right. And his response here is still wanting to only do what the living God said. Right. Now, if you think about this, Joseph, again, does not know if he's been abandoned or if he has been, he was sold by his brothers, right? Put in a position, but Dad never came looking for him. No one ever came looking for him. So he really doesn't know. The imagination could go quite wild right here. Nobody loves me. I mean, not only my brothers, but my dad, no one cares for me. Not knowing what really did or didn't happen.
And look at all these people in Egypt, and look how they're so prosperous, and look at the God they serve, and I'm just going to serve this God. He didn't do any of that.
He never credits Yoveh, the living God, Elohim, with the behavior of his brothers. He always recognizes that is a fleshly behavior, and I'm not going to walk in that way.
I know.
And the story of 39, when you look at that next to 38, we really do see a godly response and an ungodly response to the same challenges. We have Yeshua doing this with the temptations, right, in Matthew 4, where these temptations come. And how does he respond? He responds by quoting Scripture. What's in his heart is what comes out. Yeah. So again, if at 39, after these events of being thrown into well, being taken and sold, and now becoming a slave, a servant in a foreign man's house in a foreign country, if his heart is according to the ways of Yoveh, again, I personally, for me, find it very difficult to think that he was a bratty child.
Right.
And
some
ungrateful.
commentators
Because
would
if
say.
he was, then why would an ungrateful child, he would just be like, see, I knew it. It would all be again about how he's had this trauma. And he never does this. He always, and not only that, we even see in this week in chapter 40 where he talks about being stolen. And we've talked about this before, but in 40:15, when he's speaking to the servants of Pharaoh, saying, please remember me, he says, for truly I was stolen away from the land of the of the Hebrews, and also I have done nothing that they should have put me into this dungeon. We don't even see Joseph there speaking evil of his brothers. Like they abandoned me, they sold me, they were going to kill me. None of that. We don't see him speaking evil. We never do see him speaking evil of them. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of point that out because this is so important. Going back up to 39:3 about recognizing why he's being blessed. He's being blessed because of his relationship with the living God. And Deuteronomy 4, I want to bring that up because in Deuteronomy 4 is where Israel's about to go in, and Moshe is reminding them that if you will walk according to the statutes, if you will walk according to the laws and the ways in which the Lord has established for the nation, that people, other nations will look at you and say, wow, what about that God? What about their God? It's mightier than ours.
Yeah.
And what a great God to love the people like this. Remember, a loving God was a foreign concept. Everyone served a God out of fear so that they could live, or served a God to get something from them only because they were going to give something to the God. There was never this type of loving, nurturing relationship that the family of Abraham and his line had with Yahweh. I mean, think about this. The God who came down in Genesis 11 for Tower of Babel to look upon and spread everyone out. I mean, this is the God that everyone remembers.
Right.
Okay, this is, the stories are still going. People remember this. So from this event of, oh, he separated us and did all this, that God who overpowered the world now has come down, per se, and singled out a man, Abraham, and said, I'm going to go in covenant with you. The living God having a covenant with the person, a human in which he created, that was unheard of. There's no false God that would ever lower himself to be equal to a man in order to have a relationship to him. Though while the living God lowers himself to a man to have a relationship, he never ever lowers his expectations or characteristics. However, false gods, let's look at all the Greek gods, they're always, they're warring, they're grabbing women, they're raping, they're doing all the things that are attributed to mankind.
Right.
Not as their godly aspect is that they can get away with it and throw a lightning bolt if they don't like the fact that you took one of their wives.
Right.
Whew. Yeah. So
there's just so much.
Yes. And remember, they're in Egypt. There's multiple gods everywhere.
I just think that's interesting that he was known as the God that came and separated everyone, but then he singled out one man who would ultimately bring everyone back together.
Yes.
Because through Abraham comes Messiah.
Right. Great point. It's that full circle. We have that example in 37, well, actually to the whole Torah portion, but where we really do have this type and shadow of Messiah through Joseph. Well, let's just kind of look at the events. With Joseph and his earthly family, okay, we have in 37, we have where what happens? His father loves him, right? His father says, look, you are my beloved son, okay? Well, don't we have that with Yeshua? I mean, when Yeshua comes out of the water, doesn't the Lord say, behold my beloved son? I believe also at the transfiguration, okay? I think John 1 also talks about it. So we have where they're both loved by the Father, right?
Right.
Now, again, so people will say, well, how dare Israel love Joseph more? But if we look at that in 37:3, it says, and Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, not Jacob. Israel. There is a spiritual clue here. This isn't a man like Isaac who maybe loved Esau more. Because remember though, why did Isaac love Esau more? There's something more to that. Because he loved to eat of his game. Belly. Yes. He loved the self-satisfaction of the love that he got. There is no hint here with that. Israel loves Joseph. It doesn't say why. People want to say, oh, well, and okay, it says because he is the son of his old age and he made him a long robe. Okay, so, but people will say, oh, because it's Rachel's son. Okay, but when we look at the son of his old age, what's interesting is, yes, Abraham and Sarah.
So, and Eliezer says about Abraham, Isaac, when he's looking for
yes,
Rebecca.
Yes.
The son of his old age.
Yes. So I think there's something huge spiritually happening with that term, son of his old age. So Israel loved Joseph forever. I just added that, but he does. But for more than other kids. There's nothing negative here in Scripture. Do you realize that? There is nothing negative stated here. It's only what we as man have said about that verse.
Right.
But Jacob is never warned or slapped on the wrist or anything for having loved Joseph more.
Again,
actually, Joseph proves it.
Again, we've taken a spiritual concept and put our humanistic mind onto it.
Yes.
That's why we're like, oh, he was a spoiled child. That's why it's not good to love these kids more than the other. We see this here, instead of taking it like, what are the spiritual applications?
Right.
These are the verses I would imagine that Yeshua talked on the road to Emmaus.
Ooh, good point.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Talking about
I had the robe. Right.
Yes.
He was given the robe. Yeshua has the robe, right? He tells the dreams. Yeshua's having they saw him as crazy, for Yeshua,
right.
And they're calling his brother crazy. Like, you think that's going to happen?
Right.
Then what happens? Then he's sent by the Father. Yeshua's sent by the Father. Yeah. Then we have the brothers who aren't where they're supposed to be.
Right.
Israel's not where they're supposed to be.
Right.
Then we have where they're envious of him. Mm-hmm. Then they take him and throw him in, right? And then he's pulled out of the pit. Everyone thinks he's dead, but he's not.
Right.
I mean, one thing after another. But when you read Joel, which doesn't have to do with this, but kind of, when you read in Joel, you see these terrible events that happen, and then they're reversed, and then they're restored. Mm-hmm. It's a lot like Job. And really this year I started to realize Job, Joseph are very much alike.
Ooh, they
Job had all these terrible things happen, but he continued to cling on to the Lord and recognize him and do his part to be the witness that he was called to be. In this week's Torah portion, I also see where we have the first coming, second coming repeatedly shown. Okay. And we have it in 37, where you have the two dreams that represent it.
Oh, yeah.
The first and second.
Right.
We have in 38, the two sons that are born, the first and second.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You have in chapter 39, that actually 39 and 40 together, you have the first and the second coming, okay? Mm-hmm. Where he's accused, and then, the two dreams. Anyway, we have multiple first and second coming. The interesting thing about that is those who before Messiah came, we couldn't have read that and understood it.
Yeah.
But now that he's come the first time and we understand the second, we can see it. So there's a lot of things in life like that. Again, if we have studied and have learned it, when we get that one piece of the puzzle, the rest starts to make sense. Again, same thing happened with the disciples. Remember, they're like, oh, after he rose again from the dead, then they say, oh, suddenly things started making sense to them.
Right.
Because they needed that one piece of information. Right. Well, I bring that up because I find that we have a lot of things happening this week in the Torah portion that when we get information later in the Torah portion, we're like, oh, that makes sense.
Makes sense.
One of those things was the event with Tamar and Judah.
Okay.
All right. So we're told in Ruth 4, there's the blessing that says, oh, may your son be like Perez.
And Tamar.
And so there is some controversy there. One thing I know, Chuck Mesler, he makes a comment that since Perez was a bastard child, it was more like a curse blessing, because it was going to be till the 10th generation in which, before they could go into the temple. And King David is the 10th generation. That's very cool. Here's another thing. The word Metzer that is listed in Deuteronomy 23:2, where it says the Metzer, the one that cannot go in. Well, Metzer can be considered a bastard child, but the real understanding means one that is the product of an illegal marriage, one that could not have happened.
Right.
So that doesn't mean Bobby and Susie had a baby and now it's a bastard child. Bobby and Susie could have just gotten married. But it's when Bobby and his sister have a child, that is an illegal marriage. It cannot happen. Therefore, that child is considered
illegitimate or whatever.
So, I'm going to, food for thought. I love throwing these out there because, again, I would not say that what's presented as the bastard child in the 10 generations is wrong, because we actually have, by the 10th generation, he's able to go in.
Right.
But let me just throw out there something else. We also have that this blessing or is given to Ruth and Boaz. Ruth needed a Levirate marriage because her husband died. Boaz was the one who came in and married so that she could have a child. It was a legal marriage. Let's go back. Let's go back to chapter 38. There are two schools of thoughts on Levirate marriage. Here we have where a father-in-law impregnates the daughter-in-law. Mm-hmm. That is an illegal marriage. Can't get married. So that would make the Metzer complete. However, there's another school of thought that says no. As long as someone in that family, when the daughter married the family, she was married to that line. Therefore, since the son was not given to Tamar, her sleeping with the father in order only to impregnate her to have a child was a legal event. It was not illegal. Had they then gotten married, that would have been illegal. But that sexual act in order to fulfill what his sons refused to do, right, and he refused to give his other son, that was a legal act. Therefore, that puts Perez not as a bastard child, but a legitimate child. Now, if that is the case, I mean, he's legitimate no matter what, but what I mean is not having the 10th line to go in. If that's the case, going back to Ruth, then the blessing would look more like, hey, may you, who's also in a Levirate marriage, like Judah and Tamar, be blessed with
the kingly line.
The kingly line.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because that is their line.
I like that interpretation better, only
too,
because Judah says she's more righteous than I.
Right.
You know, otherwise I don't know, would have been seen as
gross,
an evil act.
Right. But Judah completely says, you are a good woman. And so the blessing might just be, may it be that you have a successful and bountiful, because remember, she has two boys, one to fulfill and one to have the kingly line. And then one other thing I'll throw out there, and then we'll end on this. I want you to really look, when you read through 37, to really understand that Reuben's role as firstborn had been removed. Okay, he was not firstborn anymore because he slept with the concubine. Because of that, next went to Joseph. Reuben is the one who understands the pressure of being the firstborn. Mm-hmm. And Reuben is the one who's looking out for Joseph. He's the one that's like, let's not kill him. I'm going to go back and protect him.
Okay.
All right. So I just want to bring that up because when you really start and look, it's very interesting how much Reuben wants to remain as a part of that family. And the kicker to that is in 37:31, when he finds that Joseph is gone. While he's upset, he's still like, what about me? And we see this characteristic again later, okay? Not perfect. But we see, he says, so they looked, in verse 30, he says, and he returned to his brothers and said, this is Reuben, the boy's gone, and where am I to go? Okay, he's really lost it. I mean, he couldn't even protect the next in line.
Right.
And here is the solution. So they took Joseph's robe, slew a male goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. And we've talked about that before. This is to preserve Reuben. Nothing to do with the father and nothing really to do with Joseph. This is to preserve Reuben, who has been removed as firstborn, but still wants to remain in the family. And then the next one we have is 38, where Judah's like, I'm done with the family, and he moves out.
Yeah.
But then, of course, we have him come back in and do what he needs to do. We'll see that later. But anyway, just things to think about as you read through. We thank you so much for joining us, spending time with us, and we hope that you have a fantastic week. Shalom.